if you have money that you would like to give to our dining services people, you can give it to Juliana. She's going to walk around like a, yeah. Yeah. Wait, I think Wyatt has some. Wait. Oh. This is good. Wyatt, was that enough? Thank you. That was good. That's good. We practiced that for a long time before I came up here. But she's going to walk around while we're doing the announcements. We'll have it again tomorrow. We're doing pretty well. I think I remembered how much we made last year. We didn't make. We collected for the dining. So we're not going to keep this money. But I'm not going to disclose it until we are closer to that amount. We're not that close yet, but it's only been a day. So I'm going to start. There's you guys are chatty, very chatty back there. Departure procedures. We put on the door to the Cushman room and also at the inn a list of, if you're flying, which bus you're scheduled for, either the 5:30 or the 8:30 bus. A couple of you have gotten in touch to say that your name was not on that list, and that is good. You should let us know if you didn't see your name. But if your name is on there and everything looks the way you wanted it to be, then just initial it so we know that you've seen it. If your name is missing, email me and let me know, and we'll add you to the list. But early departures, if you're planning on leaving early, we're going to have a staff member Friday at dinner that will have your key deposit, so you can give them your keys and get your deposit back. What we're kind of trying to avoid is people just leaving without telling us and leaving their key in their room, because sometimes they get lost. But if you want to leave Saturday early, if you have somewhere you need to be, there'll be a staff person at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And if your departure doesn't coincide with a meal, then you can come to our office in Gaylor. And if you have a departure that involves a groom shuttle, the best thing to do is email us, and we can put you on a list of some sort, one of many lists. And if you have any questions, call us or email us about that. I know it's kind of confusing. There's a lot of you, and you all have to leave. But we want to make sure that happens and that it happens smoothly for everybody. 10 minutes after the reading tonight, you can find oh yes. Yes, it will be. Yeah, we'll be up before 5, unfortunately, and we will be calling you to make sure that you're up too. And what's that? You don't care about driving people. Care in what way? Well, I mean, like, signing anything. Because driving people aren't on that list. So. Right. Oh, I see what you're saying. Right. So, no, if you were driving, we assume that you will stop by the inn Sunday morning on your way out, where we'll have somebody there taking up your keys and stuff, and that's the best way to go when you're headed out. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so 10 minutes after the reading tonight, you can find Sam if you want to walk to, there, he's waving, to Alan Tate's grave, and we have some flashlights. Somebody's going to read. It should be a moving occasion. There's poker tonight at St. Luke's, and Adam Vines is heading that up. Contrary to what you may have heard, he's not going to use our T-shirt earnings when he's playing. He's going to use his own money. There's an ATM by the bookstore, but we encourage you to play responsibly. Aaron McGraw's book, The Seamstress of Hollywood Boulevard. You guys are trying to punk the system now with this randomizing thing. There were names all over the list in slots that were leaving blank slots, and that's not how the randomizer works. It's about the total number of numbers, so I had to really work against what you're trying to do to me. But Michael Winch won fair and square randomly. Aaron McGraw's book. I don't know if he's here. Yes. Oh. I won't say that. And Dave Smith's book, Hawks on Wires, goes to Om Rapani. now Dave Smith.
I'm trying to see if I can see the clock. Most of you will know the movie, The Field of Dreams. You'll remember the character played by Shoeless Joe Jackson leads the dead baseball players out of the corn, and he says, "Is this heaven?" And Kevin Costner says, "No, it's Iowa." Well, I'm not sure this isn't heaven, to be here among so many talented writers and so many friends. And as everyone has done before me, I want to thank you all for the part you've played in a great pleasure for me. The second thing I want to say is I wonder how many readings I'll have to do in this life before I feel like I'm not in front of a jury of some really strong folks. It's terrifying to me to get up here. So I thought I can express that to you by starting with a poem by the late Bill Matthews, William Matthews. Some of you would have known him. It's called A Poetry Reading at West Point. And if you think about that, you'll understand that it was facing a large cadre of cadets sitting on the edge of their seat. I read to the entire plebe class in 2 batches. Twice the hall filled with bodies dressed alike, each toting a copy of my book. What would my shrink say, if I had one, about such a dream, if it were a dream? Question and answer time. "Sir," a cadet yelled from the balcony and gave his name and rank, and then, closing his parenthesis, yelled, "Sir," again. "Why do your poems give me a headache when I try to understand them? Do you want that?" I have a gift for gentle jokes to diffuse tension, but this was not the time to use it. I try to write as well as I can what it feels like to be human. I started picking my way carefully, for he and I were, after all, pained by the same dumb longings. I try to say what I don't know how to say, but of course, I can't get much of it down at all. By now, I was sweating bullets. I don't want my poems to be hard unless the truth is, if there is a truth. Silence hung in the hall like a heavy fabric. Now my head ached. "Sir," he yelled. "Thank you, sir." As I say, it's something like I feel. I'm going to skip around a bit. I want to read a poem, a small poem, if I can find it, for Jill, who was speaking the other night about, other afternoon actually, about a situation that is so common for so many of us now. Watch me not be able to find the poem. An ailing or sick parent. This is a poem by an Arkansas poet whose name is Michael Burns. He died not too long ago. You may not know his poems. I don't think he's that widely known. This is a poem about his mother in such a situation. It's called "She's Got Teeth, But She Don't Need Them." When I was a kid, I got up late at night and made a trip to the bathroom and then to the kitchen for a swig of cold water there at the window. I would freeze sometimes with the rim poised at my lips, blinded by the very real possibility that I might be about to drink a glass of water with my mother's false teeth. I never, thank God, did, but sometimes still I get up from a dream and make my way into an old darkness, into a room with a cold floor, and turn the tap, letting it run. And when I reach into the cabinet to get a cup, there are those dead teeth in the bottom, slick and slimy and so dreadful they won't quit talking to me. The subject of Vietnam came up, and an old friend of mine has a new book out with a couple of poems from his experience there. He was 18 years old when he was in hand-to-hand combat at Hue. So maybe a couple of these. This is called Flash. The poet is Bruce Weigel, an Ohio poet. And with the tanned and lovely sergeant, I watched the upper half of a peasant man convulse in the dust, the lower half blown away by a 250-pound bomb the Viet Cong had rigged into a booby trap. The concussion rattled my teeth and my brain. I couldn't stop watching. For a long time, no one moved. I couldn't lift my foot to take a single step. I was flushed, soaked with sweat, swooning in the movements of the dying man. I thought that if I died too, somehow I would be released from the waves of sickness that rolled over me. But the sergeant saw something like a pale curtain come over my face. Already my eyes rolling back in my head and my knees giving way to the stinking power of someone else's death right before your eyes. So he grabbed my arm and shook me back to where I needed to be to go on. It don't mean a thing, he said. And we turned back to the trees and their safe shadows and cool. I'm very fortunate to have tonight my daughter with us and one of my 4 grandsons. And I want to read a poem that she hasn't heard that's about an experience that involves her. I don't know how many years ago this would have been, maybe in the early 80s. I took her for a walk in a part of the area where we lived where they were building a housing subdivision. I took her there to show her quail, coveys of quail that I had grown up with. Some of you may not know this bird, but it was a very common thing in my young adulthood and childhood to hear the bobwhite quail around, the whistle. Now, I'm not good at these kinds of things, but you have the sense of that. So I took my daughter. We went out there. I happened to be then and am now a severe diabetic, and I had a hypoglycemic reaction, which sometimes happens. And of course, it terrified her. And she had to run and get me juice. It was a darkening evening, and I tried to make quail calls to draw her to me. At least it seemed to me that's what I was doing. The other night, there was a discussion, a lecture, you all will remember it, about intertextuality. So I want to admit to you, as you will know quickly, that this is a fairly close imitation of Ode to a Nightingale. It's called Quail. It has a little epigraph from Ode to a Nightingale, Darkling, I listen. With my youngest, Mary Catherine, I walked, a stumbling diabetic, and down I went full face, near woods with homes going up. I meant to show her the Covey's sun-flooded place, that flush once I had stepped to with my dog, a pup, coward, too soon for genes to tell, and not yet schooled. She cried, going for help, a child, strut and cluck of birds now driven away from our dreams, like angels, earth's roosts backhoed and burned. Was I wrong to take her where death waited? I'd walked on the slick creek that spooled my boots, learning to place each step, a stress in a braid line of words. So long back, yet I see the way's hacked banks above me, deep trees head high, as I stalked beauty that called, the clear water like promise muddied as I went, as I would be blinded by desire sending its wings spearing through pines. Only one more step, I'd thought, and all's heartbeat. They taught me to let them rise, gun up, dog held by words, soft said like the wishes of old men. Down tumbled head, blood spot on palm, oh yes, the seductions we learned could not be more deadly. Groan of tractors dragging away the swamp, pesticides in cells, bird eggs ripped like paper, the daily hammer crack, saw whine and roof up, swell of more people than coveys could stand. Quiet above the mown grass, our smokes and bourbon. When kids, we buzzed the free summer dark, embalmed by mosquito fogs. In windows, machines hummed. One calling voice mocked another, then all cracked. That bebop of bobble notes of birds we called unkillable, the voice of the place where we lived. I've not heard it wild in 30 years. But thinking it might bring Mary Catherine back to me, I sprayed quail calls, unable to get up off the earth. Things in my mind flashing, curtains, backyards, small wings. Years abide like family minds, with homes forlorn we started in and left, and bird calls we dreamed. With Mary, born in Salt Lake, we left the Wasatch Bench, wild with snakes, drowsy black widows, deer drifting down from snows for shrubs, and on top our roof, over sun-pooled tiles, a covey walked, tufts swaying, one prophet, a quiet crowd of souls hunting and hungry for life in the desert lawns. We left hearing their voices, small bells, dusk spilled. There'd be fewer in the next place, bell peal or birds, paths we came on filled in, water-slick boots dried, houses of our friends sinking into night, the way back just a string of little lights like dropped bread. All her life, Mary Catherine's dream and mine, how I was saved with juice, how broken bird notes called her into the dark field, saying, "Come now." Some days I make my mouth and tongue try again, the close, frantic thing a family song always is. I'm going to try to stick to a plan here so we can all get to the poker or whatever it is we're getting to. I have a new book, relatively new, and so I'll read mostly from it. The first poems are more or less childhood memories, and the first one is about remembering the way you could take a bug, I don't know what they were called, June bugs we called them, and tie a little string to them and let them trail away. And if I remember correctly, they would try to go into holes in the ground, and you try to get them out. An odd bug. The carapace, is that it? Shrugging forward like a Roman war wagon, dark gleam from the sloped shoulders and the lowered head, itself helmeted, swaying from side to side, as if the great weight with one slip of purchase might haul everything backward. The massive thighs and horn-embraced legs that dig ponderously, the tip-toe forenails that grip surface, least or best, and those already wounded, so they seem trailing appendages, brogans dragging. To this, under the 4 armpits, I tie my string, sun like an egg center, and wait. No sound. At first, no movement. Wait. Then the big head, slippage until some crack in the earth appears, and slant rays of light leveraging it forward, grass blades bent, twigs gone over like bodies, small combatants scurrying aside, now and then a pause. The heavy hold on air, I think, is death, until at last it rises up, shrugs on. Soon it will be dusk, dinner. The earth is darker, a coolness floats. Already this story breathes me, so I wait as the string plays into darkness until all is tug and touch, imagined, the big thing breaking off. It's a little poem called Bow Cleat. If you know boats, you know that the thing you tie the boat to with a rope or a line and tie that to the thing on the shore, that thing on the boat is the bow cleat. And in my mind, it still looks like a hood ornament from, say, a 58 Pontiac. I don't know why I make these associations, but I do. And in this poem, the speaker is remembering finding a piece of drifting plyboard with a bow cleat, and years later finding or seeing something like it in an odd place. Bow cleat. In the midst of a field, I saw it again, like a hood ornament, the long V-slope like a forehead, like two horns flashing the sun's high torment. So I thought of the surf padding in that day long ago, a boy dawdling the rabbity marsh line, the ragged, drifty patch of oil-soaked plyboard, a bright and well-imagined grip to strike a knot to, holding on, and walked all that inlapping afternoon, remembering as if nothing would ever go loose. And in those days, my grandmother, when I must have been 10, 12, something like that, used to take me on a bus for little trips. This was in the area of Hampton, Virginia, which is on the Tidewater. And there is actually a place in Hampton still whose name is Phoebus. I say that for those of you who think I'm alluding to Grecian myths. Phoebus is Phoebus, Virginia. And she took me to see a circus. What I remember about the circus is that there was this wonderful, tiny little car about the size of the new Fiat, really smaller, it seems to me, than the Morris Minor, Mini, whatever it is. And it pulled into the center of the ring in the circus, stopped, and a man got out, a tall, skinny man. You wouldn't have thought he could get in, but he got out. And then another tall, skinny man got out, and another, until there were 12 of them. And for years, I couldn't understand. I had written and published this poem and didn't know where they came from. And at the end of they did things like they would clown and mimic and pretend to fight and box and anything that entertained the audience. And then they climbed back in. And the light went out, and the headlights of the car came in and drove out of the ring. And I sat there wondering, how did they do this? So I read this poem not too long ago, and there's always somebody who wants to deliver you. So he came up and told me, well, of course, there was a hole underneath the car in which they were all waiting. And they just climbed up into the car and into the... So that's the secret of the poem, which I didn't know. Some of you know Mr. Core here in town. He published a version of this poem, doesn't look at all like it. It was, in fact, a villanelle, of all things. It's grown. It's called Rubber Men. You may say they only exist in stories, but I saw them. My grandmother, wide as a washing board, paid 25 cents, and we boarded the Phoebus bus, me trailing, she like a woman summoned to the gods. by low, squat houses in hot cottons, we rode until we flew past all we knew. I knew her stories would begin when her big, sweaty chest heaved, so I watched. We had our snacks in brown bags, munching as she told one about a troop of catchers, tall women, and rope swingers, and rubber men rolling in knots and caged by walls of eyeballing boys and girls. There would be fire swallowers, sword eaters, the world's weirdest of all people, who were, she said, exactly like me. I wanted to know where they came from. You'll see, she said, wait. The tent wasn't a tent at all, but high-domed, with stars of lights hung in silvery upside-down bowls, and hot with us bleachered and wedged in. I waited for the romp elephants might make in sawdust, for gurgling lions. A few seedy clowns leaned about where ropes dangled, as if, like monkeys, they'd suddenly decide up or down. Thinking was what she said they were doing. You can't see that happen. I waited. Then a tiny brown car came sputtering through its own oily cloud, coughed to a stop, so its driver spilled out his window, lanky and slinky, wearing his black pajamas. I laughed. Then another, maybe a dozen unfolded forth, each angled so if he'd turned, he'd be lost like a fallen star. I thought, where they live, they must eat nothing like fried chicken, my grandmother's gold in our bags, or potatoes creamed, or hammy summer beans I loved, cornbread's butter oozing as easy as the men had from that car. How many were they, the shadows? Surely all dead now, smiles of grease passing like joy over us kids, bored clowns yawning who couldn't or wouldn't speak, as if punished or lonely. Why have I never stopped dreaming what it felt like to be one of the shadows, packed so tight you'd laugh but think he can't get out? Then one would. I was too high to see eyes lift up like a dog over a still warm plate, or know how a face slowly opened up to the fill-in of our laughs. If one punched another or tumbled to rain like applause, the tricks just stopped as disciplined they climbed down unbelievably into a car sputtering off, us left waiting in the light. Some of you here have won a prize named after a poet named Hollis Summers. If I can find that poem. Hollis Summers was a teacher of mine, and a really interesting man. He had been a fellow student of Flannery O'Connor's at Iowa. And I don't remember many. He used to tell a lot of stories about this. The one I remember is that she mocked his name, Hollis, and he mocked hers, Flannery. Somehow that interested me. He was a very, how do I say this? He was a very feminine sort of man. He liked to smoke cigarettes in a cigarette holder. I'd never seen anybody do that. You could still smoke in colleges then, in your office, and he would do it. So I came to him one day and I gave him my manuscript of poems, and he responded to them. And the time came, I'm telling you the story so you'll know what I try to say in the poem. The time came a little later when Hollis saw me come back to where he taught, and he was then suffering from cancer. But he gave me his last manuscript of poems and wanted a response. I see all you talented, wonderful young people, and I'm here to tell you I'm not giving you a manuscript. Because you would be then put in this position. The poem is called In Memory of Hollis Summers. And I should say one more thing. We entered into this competition between us. He wanted me to call him Hollis. When I was maybe 15, 20 years younger, and I had been raised to call a senior man sir, but he wanted to be called Hollis. So I insisted on calling him sir. Christmas Eve, wild turkey in my glass, my country's finest drink. I sit remembering the poet, plump, tall, bald, wisps of smoke coiled from a cigarette holder. I offer my poetry thesis. He laughs, says, I'm a prissy man. He might have said exact or strict, as Alan Tate often did. Later, as if bruised, he'd scowl, David, must you say beautiful eyes? And years later, as if by accident, after my graduation, he meets me in the hall, his hand out. So I accept his last manuscript of poems, many speckled and mold as his forehead, veined by hours of burning tobacco, ash dark as coffee, each with scars of excisions, connections looping word to word like metastasized disease. But his steady, strong heart still going, and what he wanted heard. Mr. Summers, I'd begin, despite his quick sputters of protest, refusing still to give the Hollis he asked me many times to say against the decades between us, being, in his view, countrymen, Virginia and Kentucky joined in that Ohio room. Like pioneers with dangers in common, he seemed to think. Now, this one returned, I handed him his manuscript, not wanting the grim words I had to give, also circling like a scout back and forth at the obvious, his love for her, for the boys, an old dog, a man's ways. But I knew I'd been taught his truths, and now, fumbling to address what shadowed what he was, I made my clumsy cuts and watched him stiffen bit by bit, who every Christmas had a poem to send I don't know how many students in the end. Handwritten, the same long fingers, sharp as an aunt's, needling memory as he pointed and rasped at me, say the poem as if it matters, David. So I feel that distant hurt close in again, being alone with those cold walls, the chill that's in my hand as I try to find today a heat that summered in his words, beginning with Hollis, then reading from the posthumous backward to the start, where I must shake his hand and say, Sir. A small poem about a ubiquitous thing in the books of Southern poets, maybe others, a blue heron, which I'm told, I don't know this, I'm told is said to be an omen of good luck. Maybe so. I was trying to describe a heron, which so many have described, and I happened to have a phone call from the poet Betty Adcock, wonderful poet in North Carolina, and we got to talking about, as poets will, who was in, who was out, who was whatever. And Betty has a tendency from time to time to feel out. And she referred to herself as one of the Southern women poets. She called them the Invisibles. And I thought, what an interesting thing to say. Because it coincided in a way with herons. You will never see a heron with another heron. They must at some point get together, or there wouldn't be more herons. But they're very territorial. If you see them, they're of course fishing. They have that springy look. But they're also watching around them. They don't allow other herons to get within their territorial purview, whatever that might be. So This is a poem called Blue Heron for Betty Adcock. Neck like a coat hanger unbent, abandoned almost. The look of a closet, patches of cloth, paper, dust, the last steps imagined, gone. No ripple where she stands, gray or blue depending on the slant sun, one of the invisibles, as a friend calls the women poets of the South. Lake flat as paper, the day's end electric at her feet, steel nerve unturned, turning, eye wide. She prefers to hold her ground alone. 6-foot wings, the swift flicking her mouth is a small, silent lightning. This is a poem about the husband of a dear friend of some of you in this room, and certainly mine. The poem is called Fran's Barn. I couldn't tell you why I love barns, but I do know there are many people in this country who do. There is actually an association devoted to saving old barns. It seems to me worthy work. Well, Fran Voigt, Ellen Voigt's husband, has a wonderful barn in Marshfield, Vermont. And you can go there, and it opens up like a kind of holiness. But inside, it's a three-story barn, and smells of old barn things. Hay, I suppose, maybe horses, whatever. But Fran, because he feels that he should have something in it, has allowed people in his state to store their cars, old cars. They don't go anywhere. They don't do anything. They're just there. And somehow that appealed to me. Well, Fran suffered cancer, a fairly severe cancer. And when he came home from the hospital and entered the healing stages, he wanted to do what he had always done. He wanted to get on his tractor and mow the grass. He's a vigorous man. And Ellen didn't want him to do that because Marshfield, Vermont is not very near anything. So it was perilous, but she, of course, had to. I mean, what could she do? Fran was going to get on his tractor whether she wanted to or not. So she had to stand at the kitchen window and watch him. And this had somehow to do with the barn in my thinking. So it's called Fran's Barn. It's in 4 sections, but I'll dispense with the numbers and just read it through. A great wooden box of what she calls his toys, the time-quieted sob, hunched, a neighbor's gift, relic of a tractor, Ford, clean, bony, ready when snow ends, when the green tips appear. 2 dark-hulled survivors, convertible coupe, tarped to wait like parents in dust-moated foyer where some story, stilled now, is underway, night after day after night. The lightless ease is welcome, pastoral, like a ship's inside. Odd bits of sound he likes to stand in, feeling beams unknown old ones laid against time. This, then, what's coming, cradled hours, the wood whining. Behind this, the jug brook goes on trying to talk. Birch shifts hour by hour as if to hear better. Trembling apples, blood-red nubs, a child's heart pulse, maybe ornaments hung for holiday, forgotten, to chime again in ice rhymes that will hold a rosebud, its pink show starting soon, like hope. Wood smoke has the air like a grandmother's perfume on a sidewalk. He almost knows who it was. There's a little longing. But what stops him is the plow, its black point jamming the plank-strapped doors open, still ready enough to split the earth for its meaning. Rigid, his dad once stood here on visits, a man's place. He feels the stitches strain, his skin heaving up, out. She's watching from the kitchen window, but what could she do if he toppled as if shot? What could she do if he would lie there smelling onions just cut by the drive? Helps all so far away from these acres he mows, pushing, breath, the sumps gargle into the brook. Tomorrow they'll fly, clinic, Houston, no stacked books, framed children, no cry of ravens, the color her hair used to be. New words like instruments chilled, calibrated. In the barn, he tries to imagine them, but all that comes is how the door opens, the darkness flutters, the day blinks blue. It's interesting, isn't it? He'd like to say to someone, not there. Things in this dark look kept, saved up. A person's whole life translated, but nothing leaves. It's protected and rotting too. What comes in does that. He shoves the plow aside, face flecked with a cut weed, then gazes in a moment. People ask him what it's all for. It's for itself, is the best answer he's summoned. The Citroen floating weirdly up and down because it can. Same barn swallows nesting their old corners because they can. His barn kept because he can love it all, and he can shut the doors again tonight. I even have the numbers written down. I still can't find it. This is a poem called Dry Cleaner. And it's about, well, I know it was here not long ago. Here it is. It's about that ordinary thing of going to the dry cleaner, but it could have been going to the pharmacist or going somewhere where you have to stand in line and you get impatient. Well, you don't, I do. And the person in front of you wants to tell a story. And you're going, and what can you say, Dry cleaner. It will explain itself, I think. At the dry cleaners, I stand in line, my feet shuffling, weight from side to side, impatience all over me, while the woman, light brown, with her Creole story, drones on. In New Orleans, none would notice. She's exotic in Baltimore, a dawn bird everything hears. Even the clerk leans into her tail, clucking softly. When people behind me cough, she won't be rushed. She's got her whole story to go. Soon there's a man she never married, her mother opposed. Far away still. And he went into a bar, wrong place, wrong color, wrong words, maybe. A good man. He'll never come away of there, not coming home, geraniums on the back porch, and not replace the bad tire her Honda has, who could always be telling her what time does in the kitchen if she stand half naked, letting his dog go on out. So let me pay you for him, give you money, because you is nice, and I remember her nearly singing voice sighs. The sleeved pants, 2 shirts hung on the brass ring, all finished, unclaimed, the stiffened stains gone away. The perfectly starched cloth, a redemption so beautiful it might be the linen of royalty, but small for a man 2 of us will think of as sleep scuffs house walls like tide under a boat. How nice they are, these women, doing the little one person can for another, which is in the end a wash of memorable words that leave you standing. It's hard to write a poem about anger. Mr. Levine, whom you all know, does it so wonderfully well, he made me admire it, and I wanted to do it. And one day I found myself with a bat in my hand. I won't tell you why I had it, but it shocked me that there I was on my lawn with a bat in my hand. So this is a poem called A Dream of a Bat. Not the kind of bats we have around here at night, but a baseball bat. We all think it's so easy not to be this man, or too hard, because we'd not pick up a baseball bat and come waddling drunk to the bar, showing off for pals. Then at the blare of horn, words boiling out of him outside, it wouldn't be like us to catch the boss in his truck, still cursing a man for Christ's sake who wasn't at work as he ought to have been. Another of those days, long history, and he, after all, could swing that old baby, asphalt full of glass, like silvery tears, blood too, then silence like you never heard it, and little heads of sparrows going off as if amplified, flinging themselves ahead. What do they know, he thinks, falling down? Plenty, he squints, they know goddamn plenty. Why they fly off so fast? He has to piss so bad. He can't push himself up, so thinks, where do they go when they have to go? The bat helps him up. Its gouged, scabby, scarred length, useless as the dick he always trusted, a weight he'll drag on home. Nothing the woman gets anymore. Why is it slippery? Shades cool. Is it Saturday? He can clean up the yard, haul to Goodwill, wait for a drink like his father, or swing the bat at pine cones, work something out. When he gazes, it leans into a boy's hand, fingers picking it from a rack of its kind, cleats, odor of his glove with neat's foot. By itself, it has stood in the darkness so long. What must he do with anger that blows at him? He has struck apples, rocks, gourds, and of course balls. He can see the boy go in to buy it, then swing at the face that fired him. A dream, they say in the bar, the swing he had, who rose up to piss, but darted out like a bird at last. Okay.